somewhere out beyond the edge of the known world, or at least beyond the edge of what any single person could hold in their mind all at once. There stretched a road. It was not one road, really, but many roads braided loosely together the way a river braids across a wide, flat plain, finding its way around stones and sandbars, always moving, always searching for the easiest passage through. Merchants and pilgrims and wandering scholars had been walking these roads for centuries before our story begins, and they would go on walking them for centuries after. And in the 12th century, somewhere in the middle of all that long, slow human movement, our particular evening is about to begin. The afternoon light is doing something very beautiful right now. It is the kind of light that arrives in the last hour before the sun touches the horizon, when everything in the world seems to lean slightly gold, when dust motes floating in the air catch that warmth and hold it a moment before it passes. Across a wide, dry plain, the sort of plain where the earth is the color of pale clay and the grasses are short and silvery and they whisper against each other in the wind, a caravan is moving. It has been moving since before dawn. The people and animals in it have been walking for many hours, and the walking has been long and quiet and steady, the way all very long journeys eventually become quiet, the body finding its rhythm and the mind settling into something slower and more patient than ordinary thought. There are perhaps 40 camels in this caravan. Perhaps a few more. They move in a loose line, each one roped gently to the one ahead, and their feet make a soft, padded sound against the dry earth, a sound that is almost like breathing. Rhythmic and unhurried, camels are remarkable creatures for this kind of travel. Their feet are wide and soft-soled, designed by some long patience of nature to spread across sand and gravel without sinking. Without complaint, they carry enormous loads, bales of silk wrapped in oiled cloth to keep out the dust, sacks of dried spices whose fragrance drifts back along the line of the caravan. Faint but unmistakable, a smell of cardamom and pepper and something sweeter beneath. Like dried roses, there are also smaller bundles, carefully packed, that might contain glass beads from the workshops of craftsmen far to the west, or folded lengths of cotton dyed in deep indigo, or small clay jars sealed with wax that hold precious oils or pigments or medicines. Everything is wrapped and padded and secured, because the road is long and the goods are valuable, and the merchants who own them have spent months, some of them years, in the patient accumulation of things worth carrying across the world. The men who walk beside the camels are dressed for the climate, which is to say they are dressed in layers. Loose robes of undyed linen or rough cotton over which they have pulled heavier cloaks as the afternoon has cooled. And their heads are wrapped in cloth that protects them from the sun and from the fine dust that rises with every footstep and floats in a low pale haze around the moving caravan. Some of them are merchants themselves, men who have traveled this road before and know its rhythms and its resting places. Others are hired hands, men who know camels and know the road and hire themselves out season by season to whoever needs them. There are a few men on horseback, guards perhaps, or senior merchants who have earned the comfort of riding, and their horses are small and sturdy and move with a calm, economical trot. Somewhere near the middle of the caravan there is a mule carrying a wooden cage, and inside the cage, very quietly, two birds sit with their feathers fluffed against the cooling air. They are a gift, or perhaps a trade item, or perhaps simply companions that someone did not want to leave behind. The languages being spoken along this line of travelers are several. Near the front, two men are talking in Persian, which was in this century the great language of trade and culture across much of this part of the world. A language that moved along the Silk Road, the way water moves along a channel, finding its way into every conversation, every transaction, every negotiation. Their voices are low and easy. The conversation of men who have been walking together long enough that they no longer need to say very much to understand each other. A little further back, a small group of men speak in a Turkic dialect. Their words clipped and warm, and one of them laughs at something, and the laugh travels up the line in the still air. Soft and brief and friendly. Near the rear of the caravan, a man who has come from somewhere much further east, from the edges of China perhaps, or from one of the great trading cities that sat between China and the steppes, walks in a comfortable silence, watching the horizon. And now, in that golden late afternoon light, someone near the front of the caravan sees something. There is no dramatic cry, no sudden stopping. The man simply raises one hand and points, and the man beside him looks. And they both look, and there is a small, quiet exchange of words, and then a kind of settling happens along the caravan. A collective easing of something that had been held tense without anyone quite noticing. Because there, on the horizon, rising from the flat plain like something that has grown up slowly from the earth itself, are walls. The Caravanserai sits at the edge of a low rise in the land, which is why it can be seen from some distance away. It is built of stone, pale, sandy-colored stone that in this light seems to glow faintly, as though it has been storing the warmth of the day and is now giving it back slowly to the cooling air. The walls are high and thick, the kind of walls that are built not to impress but to shelter, to keep the wind out, to hold the warmth in, to give the people inside a sense of enclosure and safety after long days of open sky and open road. There are towers at the corners, not tall towers, not watchtowers built for drama, but solid, square, practical towers that give the building its shape against the sky. Above the main gate, which faces the road, there is an arch, and even from this distance, the caravan's experienced travelers can see that the arch is decorated. Carved stone, perhaps, or tile work. Some gesture of craft and care that says to the arriving traveler, someone built this with intention. Someone wanted this to be more than merely functional. Caravanserais were built all along the great trading routes of the medieval world, and they were built for a very specific purpose, which was to provide a safe and predictable resting place at the end of each day's journey. The distances between them were calculated, more or less to match a day's comfortable travel, roughly 20 to 30 miles, depending on the terrain. This meant that a merchant setting out in the morning could walk through the day knowing that by evening there would be walls and a roof and water and, most importantly, other people. The loneliness of the road was real, and the comfort of arriving somewhere known was not a small thing. These buildings were, in their quiet way, one of the great practical achievements of the medieval trading world. A network of shelter spread across thousands of miles of difficult terrain, maintained by rulers and governors and wealthy patrons who understood that trade required infrastructure, that the flow of goods required the flow of people, and that people needed rest. This particular caravanserai, in this particular evening in the 12th century, has been standing for perhaps 30 years. It was built under the patronage of a regional governor, whose name is carved into the stone above the gate, in an inscription that most travelers cannot read, but that several of them touch with their fingertips as they pass through. A gesture of acknowledgement, of gratitude perhaps, directed at whoever made this possible. The building has been repaired and added to over the decades. A new well dug in the courtyard. A section of the stable roof replaced after a winter storm. A small room set aside for travelers who wish to wash and pray. It has the comfortable, slightly worn quality of a place that has been used well and cared for. The way a good coat looks after many seasons of wearing. Soft at the elbows, shaped to the body. Better for its years of use. The caravan is close enough now that the travelers can begin to see more detail. They can see the gate is open. It will close at nightfall, but for now it stands wide and welcoming. They can see, or perhaps they can imagine they see, the faint movement of smoke above the walls, which means fires have been lit, which means cooking has begun, which means the caravanserai is already occupied and alive and warm. The smell of wood smoke is something that travels a long way on still air. And if you have been walking all day in the dry, dusty, spice-tinged air of the caravan, the smell of wood smoke from a settled fire is one of the most deeply comforting things in the world. It means shelter. It means the day's walking is nearly done. It means food and rest and the company of other human beings under a solid roof. The camels seem to sense the change in direction. Or perhaps they simply respond to the slight shift in pace that happens when the men at the front begin to move with a little more purpose. They do not hurry. Camels rarely hurry. And after a day of walking, they have no interest in hurrying. But there is something in the way they hold their long necks, something in the rhythm of their padded feet, that suggests they too are ready for the evening to begin. They know, in the way that animals who travel regularly come to know such things, what the approach to a stopping place feels like. They know that soon there will be water and fodder and the chance to lower themselves slowly to the ground and rest their legs and close their eyes against the last of the day's light. The plain around the caravanserai is not entirely empty. There are a few scrubby trees growing near what must be a water source. Their leaves are dark and small, and they cast thin shadows in the late light. And there is a low stone trough outside the walls where animals can drink before they are brought inside. A boy, perhaps 12 years old, is sitting on the edge of the trough, and he stands when he sees the caravan approaching, and he watches it come with the serious, attentive expression of a child who has a job to do and is doing it carefully. He is one of the caravanserai's staff, a helper and watcher, and it is partly his responsibility to be ready for arriving travelers, to help with the animals, to run messages, to fetch water. He has seen many caravans arrive at this gate, and he watches this one with the same quiet attention he brings to all of them. The light is changing now, moving from gold towards something softer and more diffuse. The sky above the plain beginning to deepen at the edges into the pale violet that comes just before dusk. The air is cooling steadily. In this part of the world, the temperature drops quickly once the sun begins to fall, and the travelers who have been warm enough in their robes through the afternoon are now pulling their cloaks tighter, grateful for the weight of the fabric against their shoulders. One of the merchants near the front of the caravan reaches into a bag hanging from his saddle and takes out a small piece of dried fruit. A date, perhaps, or a dried apricot. and puts it in his mouth and chews slowly, tasting the concentrated sweetness of it. A small private comfort at the end of a long day. There are perhaps other caravans that will arrive this evening, or perhaps this one is the last. By the time the stars are fully out, the gate will be closed and the courtyard will be full, and the caravanserai will hold within its walls a small temporary community drawn together from many different places and many different lives by the shared fact of the road. But that is still a little while away. For now, the caravan is still moving across the plain, still closing the distance between the road and those warm stone walls. And the evening is still gathering itself quietly around the travelers, and the smoke is rising from the fires inside. And the boy by the water trough is watching, and the camels are walking with their soft padded steps through the pale dust. There is something very peaceful about this moment, this particular sliver of time between the long day of walking and the arrival at rest. The hard part is done. The destination is visible. The body is tired in that deep, satisfying way that comes from honest physical effort sustained over many hours. And the tiredness is not unpleasant. It is the tiredness that makes rest feel like a gift. That makes a warm room and a place to sit feel like extraordinary luxury. The merchants and their hired men and their loaded camels are moving through the last few hundred yards of the day's journey. And the walls of the caravanserai are growing taller and more solid as they approach. And the arch above the gate is becoming clearer, and the carved decoration on it catches the last of the slanting light and holds it for a moment in the shallow cuts of the stone. Very soon the caravan will pass through that gate. Very soon the courtyard will receive them, and the evening will begin in earnest. The unloading of the camels, the drawing of water, the lighting of more fires, the spreading out of sleeping mats, the first shared meal of the night. But all of that is just ahead, just on the other side of the gate, waiting quietly in the warm, smoky air of the enclosed courtyard. For now, the caravan is still outside, still moving, still in that gentle in-between space of the last few steps of a long day. And the evening is soft around them, and the walls are close, and everything is about to become still. The camels know somehow that the walking is finished for today. There is something in the way they slow their last few paces, something in the way their great heads lower just slightly as they pass beneath the arched gateway. That suggests an old and practiced understanding of arrival. They have done this before. Many of them, they have stood in courtyards very much like this one, in the blue-gray hour between late afternoon and true evening. And their bodies remember what that means. It means rest is coming. It means the weight they carry will soon be lifted from them. And that knowledge moves through them quietly, the way a long breath moves through a sleeping house. The courtyard itself is wide and open to the sky, and the sky above it now holds the last pale wash of daylight, that particular shade of ivory and soft amber that settles over the high desert in the hour before the stars appear. The walls of the caravanserai rise on all four sides, thick and composed of the same pale stone as the land around it, so that in certain lights the building seems almost to have grown from the earth rather than been placed upon it. There are archways along the inner walls, deep and shadowed, and behind those archways are the stalls where the animals will sleep, and the rooms where the merchants will spread their bedding, and the small alcoves where a lamp can be set and a man can sit for a little while in the particular quiet of someone who has arrived somewhere safe. But that is still a little way ahead. First, there is the unloading. It begins without ceremony, without any signal that a stranger could identify. One man simply moves toward his lead camel and begins to work at the knots of a rope. And then another man does the same. And then the whole courtyard is gently alive with the soft sounds of that work. The ropes are thick and fibrous, woven from plant material that has been twisted and twisted again until it holds tremendous weight. And they have been knotted with a particular kind of care that takes years to learn properly. A good knot holds through the whole long day of walking, through the swaying and the shifting of the load, through the moments when a camel steps sideways or stumbles on a loose stone. And yet when the time comes to undo it, a practiced hand can find the right place to pull, and the whole thing loosens almost willingly, as though it too is glad to be released. The loads themselves are extraordinary things, wrapped and bound and layered with such attention that they arrive in almost exactly the same condition they left in, days or sometimes weeks ago. Imagine the smell of the wrappings as they are loosened. A warm, complex smell, something like dry wood and something like spice, and something like the particular dusty sweetness of fabric that has been folded for a long time in the heat. Each bundle holds its own interior world. There are bolts of silk from the workshops of the East, wound so tightly that they weigh more than you might expect from something so fine. Their outer wrapping stiff with road dust, but the fabric inside still cool and impossibly smooth to the touch. There are sacks of dried goods, of spices ground and whole, of resins and gums that have been collected from trees in places very far from here. There are small wooden chests with iron fittings, and leather bags that clink softly when they are moved, and ceramic vessels packed in straw so carefully that not one has broken despite the long miles of uneven ground. The men who do this work are not the merchants themselves. For the most part, they are the drivers, the handlers, the ones whose particular skill is the management of animals and loads across difficult terrain. They are quiet workers, economical in their movements, and they have the kind of focused attention that comes from doing something difficult so many times that it has become second nature. They do not need to discuss what they are doing. Each man knows his animals and his loads, knows which rope to loosen first, knows how to position himself so that when the bundle slides free, it does not knock him sideways. There is a rhythm to it, a kind of unhurried efficiency that is almost peaceful to watch. The camels, for their part, are patient and occasionally vocal. They make sounds throughout this process, low rumbling complaints and soft gurgles, not from distress but simply because they are creatures who express themselves freely and have opinions about most things. When a particularly heavy load is finally lifted clear, a camel might turn its head and regard the handler with an expression of deep and ancient indifference, as though the whole business of carrying things across the world is something it has agreed to but never fully endorsed. Then it looks away again, back toward the far wall or toward the other camels, and settles into the long, slow patience that is their natural state when the work is done. The loads are set down along the edges of the courtyard in careful rows, each merchant's goods grouped together, each bundle placed so that it can be checked and accounted for before the light fails entirely. This accounting is a serious matter. Done with concentration, a merchant will move along his row of bundles, touching each one, checking the seals on the chests and the integrity of the wrappings, satisfying himself that everything is as it should be. Most of the time it is. The road is long and the conditions are hard, but the systems of packing and protecting goods have been refined over generations, and a well-packed load survives the journey remarkably well. When a merchant finds everything in order, there is a small visible relaxation in his posture, a slight settling of the shoulders. That is the physical expression of relief. The Caravanserai has staff, men who work here and nowhere else, whose whole lives are organized around the rhythm of caravans arriving and departing. They move through the courtyard now with the ease of people in their own home, which in a real sense this is. They carry water for the animals in large clay vessels, and the sound of water being poured is one of the first truly restful sounds of the evening. A low, steady pouring that the camels lean toward before it has even reached them, their long necks stretching with a slow and graceful hunger. The water vessels are cool to the touch, the clay having kept the water at a temperature that feels remarkable after the heat of the day. And the camels drink with a seriousness and depth of attention that is almost meditative. Fodder is brought as well, dry grasses and roughage that has been stored in the Caravanserai's own stores, and the smell of it mingles with the other smells of the courtyard. The dust and the spices and the animals themselves, and from somewhere deeper in the building, the first suggestion of smoke and cooking, a smell that reaches the tired travelers like a gentle announcement that the evening is being prepared for them. Among the merchants in this particular courtyard on this particular evening, there are men from places so different from one another that in other circumstances they might never have shared a meal. There is a group from the cities of Persia, experienced travelers who move with the unhurried confidence of men who have made this journey many times and know exactly what to expect. There are traders from further east, from the great cities along the routes through Central Asia, carrying goods that have already passed through several pairs of hands before reaching them. And there are men from the Mediterranean world, from cities where the language and the food and the architecture are entirely different, who have come a very long way to be here and who carry in their faces a slight permanent alertness that comes from navigating the world as a foreigner. And yet in the courtyard, in the shared work of unloading, these differences are set aside in the most natural way imaginable. A rope needs two people to manage it properly, and the two people available might not share a language, but they share the rope, and that is enough. A bundle is awkward to lift alone, and a man nearby will simply step in and take the other end. And the small nod of acknowledgement that passes between them is entirely sufficient. The courtyard creates its own temporary community, organized not around origin or language or religion, but around the immediate practical needs of the evening. And within that community, a kind of wordless goodwill circulates as naturally as the evening air. There is a caravanserai keeper, a man of middle age with the particular quality of calm authority that comes from managing complicated situations day after day for many years. He moves through the courtyard with a lamp already lit, though the light is not yet truly needed, and he speaks to the various groups in turn, in whatever language or combination of languages serves. He knows enough of several tongues to be useful in all of them, and where language fails, he has gestures and expressions that have been developed over years of practice into a precise and efficient system of communication. He shows each group to their stalls, indicates where the water is, points out the rooms that are available for sleeping, and does all of this with a manner that is welcoming without being effusive. Efficient without being cold, he has done this hundreds of times, perhaps thousands, and he does it with the same quality of attention each time, which is itself a kind of skill. The stalls along the walls are generous, built to accommodate the large bodies of camels and horses, with floors of packed earth that have been swept and freshened. There is straw, and the camels are led into their places with the ease of long habit, their halters tied loosely to iron rings set into the stone walls. Once settled, they begin almost immediately to chew, working their jaws in that slow circular motion that is one of the most restful sights in the world. A rhythm so unhurried and so regular that it seems to belong to some time outside of ordinary time, some slower and more patient dimension of the evening. The merchants, their animals seen to, begin to turn their attention to themselves. Bags are carried into rooms. Bedding is unrolled, sandals are loosened and set aside. There is water for washing, carried in by the Caravanserai staff in smaller vessels. And the sensation of washing the dust of the road from one's face and hands at the end of a long day is one of those simple physical pleasures that requires no elaboration. The water is cool, the dust is real, and the relief of one meeting the other is immediate and complete. Lamps are being lit throughout the building now, one by one, and the courtyard is shifting from the pale ambient light of the late evening sky to the warmer, more intimate light of flame. Each lamp creates its own small circle of gold, and where those circles overlap and mingle, the light becomes something soft and inclusive. The kind of light that makes everything within it feel closer and more companionable. The shadows in the archways deepen pleasantly, and the stars above the open courtyard are beginning to appear. First one, and then a few, and then more. The sky darkening from ivory to a deep and tender blue. The sounds of the courtyard are changing too. The sounds of work, the ropes and the loads and the calling of instructions are giving way to quieter sounds. The steady chewing of the camels, the low murmur of conversation from the rooms along the walls, the occasional soft clank of a cooking vessel from the kitchen, where the evening meal is being prepared with the same unhurried competence that governs everything in this place. Someone somewhere in the building is pouring something liquid from one container to another, and the sound carries in the evening air with perfect clarity. A small domestic music. The loads are all down now. The animals all settled, the rooms all occupied. The courtyard, which an hour ago was full of the organized activity of arrival, is settling into something quieter and more contemplative. A few men sit near the entrance to their rooms, their backs against the warm stone of the walls, their faces turned up toward the darkening sky or simply at rest, looking at nothing in particular with the unfocused gaze of people who have stopped moving and are allowing their bodies to understand that fact. The stone of the walls holds the warmth of the day, and if you were to press your hand against it, you would feel that warmth radiating back at you. Steady and generous, the stored heat of many hours of sunlight giving itself back into the cool of the evening. The courtyard smells of animals and dust and spice and the first faint threads of whatever is cooking. And underneath all of those smells, there is the smell of the stone itself, ancient and mineral and clean. The smell of a place that has been standing long enough to have a character of its own. The caravanserai keeper makes one last slow circuit of the courtyard, checking that all is well, that every animal has water, that every traveler has found their place. He pauses at the gate for a moment, looking out at the road that brought these people here. The road that runs in both directions into the darkness, carrying its invisible freight of all the journeys that have been made along it and all the journeys still to come. Then he turns back to the courtyard, to the lamps and the low voices and the slow breathing of the animals. And he is satisfied everything is in its place. The evening is doing what evenings here do, which is to gather everything in, to draw the warmth and the light inward, and to let the great quiet of the desert night settle over the walls and the roof and the sleeping loads and the tired travelers like something soft and without weight, like the last of the day folding itself gently closed. And in the kitchen, the meal is nearly ready, and the smell of it is moving through the archways now, warm and particular and full of the promise of sitting still for a while and eating something good. And that is where the evening is taking everyone, slowly and without hurry, toward the table and the warmth and the companionable quiet of strangers sharing food. But before the table, before the warmth and the shared bread, there is the quieter work of settling the animals. And this too has its own unhurried ceremony, its own particular peace. The camels have been walking since before the sun found its full height. They have carried bolts of silk wound tight as sleeping children, sacks of cardamom and dried rose petals, small cedar chests fitted with iron locks, amphorae sealed with wax the color of old honey. They have carried all of this across ground that shifts from dust to gravel to the faint ghost of a path worn into the earth by 10,000 previous crossings. And now at last they are here. And they know it. Animals that travel the same roads season after season develop a sense for arrival that is almost philosophical. The pace changes, the ears. Those long patient ears swivel forward. Something in the slope of the neck softens. The caravanserai stable runs along the inner wall of the compound. A long, low structure with a roof of fitted stone and a floor of packed earth that has been swept and reswept so many times it has taken on a kind of smoothness. Almost a polish, the way any surface does when it has been tended with consistent care across many years. The ceiling is just high enough. The air inside holds the warmth of the animals that sheltered here the night before. And the night before that. A warmth that is dense and living and not unpleasant, layered through with the smell of dry hay and the faint sweetness of camel breath, which is its own particular thing, grassy and warm and faintly fermented, like the inside of a barn where good things are stored. The lead cameleer, a man who has made this particular stretch of road so many times that he measures the year not in months but in crossings, moves to the first camel with the ease of long habit. He places one hand just below the animal's jaw, not gripping, just resting, a gesture of acknowledgement rather than control. And he makes a low sound, a kind of descending hum at the back of the throat. And the camel considers this for a moment, blinking slowly and then folds itself to the ground in that remarkable way camels have. Front knees first, the whole great body tilting and then settling with a soft, heavy exhalation, like a sigh that has been saved up for hours. Imagine the sound of it. That long breath releasing, the straw shifting beneath the animal's weight. The small creak of the saddle frame as it is finally unburdened. The unloading is methodical and gentle. Each bundle is lifted free and carried to the storage alcoves that line the far wall. Deep niches cut into the stone that are just wide enough for a man to slide a rolled carpet or a bundle of goods and know it will sit safely until morning. The cameliers work in pairs, one lifting, one guiding, moving with the quiet coordination of people who have done this together so many times that words are rarely needed. A tilt of the head, a slight shift of the hands. The work speaks for itself. Some of the merchants come to oversee the unloading of their most precious cargo, standing nearby with the particular stillness of people who are trying to appear calm. A Persian merchant in a coat the color of deep water watches as two men carry a long wooden case, something inside it wrapped in layers of oiled cloth. And he does not reach out or interfere. He simply watches, and when the case is settled safely into its alcove and the men step back, something in his shoulders drops, a fraction almost imperceptible, and he turns away and goes back toward the courtyard, his hands folded loosely behind him. The camels, freed of their loads, seem to expand slightly, the way any creature does when a weight it has been carrying is finally set aside. They shift in the straw, arrange their legs, turn their heads to look at one another with those long-lashed eyes that hold an expression somewhere between boredom and ancient wisdom. They are fed from shallow troughs, dried grass and a measure of grain, and they eat with a slow grinding patience that is almost meditative to watch. The sound of it, that steady, soft rhythm of chewing, is one of the most restful sounds in the world, once you have heard it enough times to know what it means. It means the day is done. It means the road has been put away until morning. The cameliers water the animals carefully, carrying leather buckets from the cistern that sits in the corner of the stable yard, a deep stone basin fed by a channel in the wall. The water cool and slightly mineral, tasting of the mountain it came from. The camels drink with great deliberateness, lowering their heads and pulling the water up in long, slow draws. And the sound of it is soft and continuous, a kind of quiet lapping that fills the stable with a sense of sufficiency, of needs being met, of the world being, for this moment, exactly as it should be. There is a young boy who works in the stable, perhaps 12 years old, perhaps a little older, one of several who are apprenticed to the Caravanserai keeper, learning the work of the place by doing it. He moves among the camels with a confidence that is still slightly performative, the confidence of someone who has recently conquered a fear and is quietly proud of it. He carries a brush made of coarse fibers bound to a short wooden handle, and he moves along the flank of the nearest camel in long, slow strokes, working loose the dust of the road. The camel tolerates this with magnificent indifference, continuing to chew, gazing at some middle distance with an expression of serene unconcern. The dust comes off in soft clouds that drift and settle in the lamplight. The stable is lit by oil lamps hung from iron hooks in the low beams, and their light is warm and unsteady, moving with the small currents of air that come in through the ventilation slits near the roofline. Everything in that light looks amber, looks ancient, looks like something from a story someone is telling very slowly in a quiet room. The saddles and their frames are stacked along one wall, leather oiled and supple from long use, the wood worn smooth where hands have gripped it over years of loading and unloading. The ropes that secured the loads are coiled with care, each one laid in a loop that will be easy to pick up and use again tomorrow morning when the whole process will run in reverse. The bundles lifted out of their alcoves. The animals loaded again, the road resumed. But that is tomorrow. Tonight the ropes are coiled and the saddles are stacked, and there is nothing more to carry. One of the older cameliers sits down on an upturned wooden bucket near the entrance to the stable. Just inside the threshold, where the lamplight from the courtyard mixes with the warmer light from inside. He takes off his sandals and sets them beside him and stretches his feet out in front of him on the cool earth floor. He has the look of a man who has arrived somewhere. Not just at the Caravanserai, but at the particular moment in the evening when the work is done and the rest of the night belongs to no one but himself. He sits there for a while, not doing anything in particular, watching the boy continue his slow grooming of the camels, listening to the sound of chewing and the occasional soft grunt from one of the animals adjusting its position in the straw. In the far corner of the stable, two camels have arranged themselves close together, their necks nearly touching, and they seem to sleep, or something close to sleep, their breathing long and slow and audible. The boy finishes his brushing and hangs the brush on its hook and stands for a moment looking at them. And then he too goes quiet, watching, and there is something in his stillness that suggests he is storing this away. This particular sight, the two animals breathing together in the amber lamplight, without quite knowing why. The Caravanserai keeper makes his evening round of the stable, a routine he has kept for so many years that it has become less an inspection than a kind of greeting, a nod to the animals and the men and the work of the day now finished. He checks the water troughs, runs a hand along the wall near the drainage channel to feel for damp, looks up at the roof beams with the practiced eye of someone who knows every crack and timber in this building as well as he knows his own hands. Everything is as it should be. He speaks briefly to the older camelier, a few words exchanged in the easy shorthand of people who have known each other across many seasons. And then he moves on, carrying his small lamp, his shadow large and slow on the stable wall. Outside in the courtyard, the evening continues its gentle business. The smell of cooking drifting from the kitchen, the low murmur of conversation from the merchants who have already found their places near the fire. But in the stable the pace is different. Slower still, the air thick with warmth and the smell of animals and hay, and the particular dusty sweetness of a long road finally ended. The boy brings fresh straw to spread in the sleeping area at the back of the stable, where the cameliers will rest tonight, close to their animals as they always do on the road. Not because they must, but because this is simply how it is. The animals and the men belonging to the same traveling world, sharing its rhythms, its early mornings and its late arrivals, its dust and its water and its rest. He spreads the straw with a wooden rake, working carefully, and the sound of it is soft and whispering, a sound like something being smoothed out, like the last wrinkle being pressed from a piece of cloth. The camels shift and settle. One of them makes a low sound, not quite a moan, not quite a hum, something in between, a sound that seems to come from deep in the chest, resonant and unhurried, and it hangs in the air of the stable for a moment and then fades. And after it fades, the quiet seems deeper than before, the way quiet always does after a sound has moved through it. The older camelier puts his sandals back on and stands, stretching his arms above his head, and then walks slowly toward the back of the stable where the straw has been freshly laid. and he lowers himself onto it with the careful movements of a man whose body has been carrying the day for a long time. And he lies back and looks up at the ceiling, at the low stone arches just visible in the lamplight, and his breathing slows almost immediately. The way the breathing of people who live outdoors and work with their bodies tends to slow when they finally lie down, as if the body knows exactly what to do and does it without being asked. The boy brings a blanket, a rough woven thing in stripes of brown and cream, and drapes it over the man with a quietness that suggests he has done this before, or watched someone do it, and learned from watching. The man does not stir. The lamp nearest the sleeping area is turned down low, its flame reduced to a small steady point of orange light, just enough to see by, not enough to disturb. The camels breathe, the straw settles. Somewhere in the wall a small creature moves, a mouse or something smaller, and then is still. The stable at night is a place of profound and ordinary peace, the peace of things that have been used well and are now resting, of work that was done carefully and is now finished, of animals and people who have traveled together through difficulty and arrived somewhere safe, somewhere with walls and a roof and water and food, and the company of others who understand the road because they are also on it. There is a kinship in that, quiet and unspoken, that needs no ceremony to make it real. The lamplight moves softly on the stone walls, on the sleeping shapes of the camels, on the coiled ropes and the stacked saddles, and the boy who sits for just a moment more near the entrance before he too will go to find his supper and his rest. He sits with his knees drawn up and his chin resting on them, listening to the breathing of the animals, and his eyes are heavy, and the sounds of the courtyard beyond are distant and warm. Voices and the clink of pottery and the smell of something spiced drifting on the cool air. He will go in a moment, just not yet. And the evening moves as evenings do, gently forward, carrying everyone with it. The merchants and the cameleers, the keeper and the boy, toward the food and the fire and the slow unwinding that comes when the day's last task is done and the night opens quietly ahead, full of nothing more urgent than rest. And into that gentle unwinding, something warm began to move through the courtyard. Not a sound exactly, not quite a smell yet, though the smell would come soon enough. It was more like a change in the quality of the air itself. A softening, a drawing together of people who had, until now, been occupied with their own separate concerns. The merchants who had been checking their bales and counting their coin pouches began, one by one, to set those tasks aside. The camel handlers who had been murmuring to their animals in low, patient tones began to drift toward the center of the caravanserai, toward the wide open heart of the courtyard where the braziers had been arranged in a loose, generous cluster, their coals already breathing out a steady amber heat. The braziers themselves were simple things, wide iron bowls set on legs, blackened from long use, the kind of objects that had been carried from one end of the road to the other so many times that they had absorbed something of the journey itself into their metal. They held their coals with a kind of steady patience, glowing a deep orange at the center, fading to gray at the edges, and the heat they gave off was not the sharp heat of a new fire, but something older and more settled. The kind of warmth that seems to rise up through the soles of your feet and spread slowly into your chest. The caravanserai's keeper, or one of his people, had begun the preparations some time before the sun finished setting. There was a rhythm to this that everyone in the courtyard understood without needing to be told. A rhythm that belonged to this particular kind of place and this particular kind of evening. Flat rounds of bread had been stacked near the fire, wrapped loosely in cloth to keep them soft. Dried fruits, figs and apricots and small wrinkled raisins the color of garnets, had been set out in shallow clay bowls. There was oil for dipping, pressed from olives grown somewhere far to the west of here, poured into a small earthenware vessel that caught the firelight and held it. And there was something simmering in a large pot suspended over one of the braziers. Something fragrant with spices that most of the travelers would have recognized from their own kitchens, even if they would have named those spices differently, even if they would have measured them in different proportions and combined them in ways that told the story of wherever they had come from. The smell, when it finally arrived, was the kind of smell that loosens something in the shoulders. Cumin, perhaps, and coriander, and something darker and more resinous underneath. A spice that had traveled a great distance in a small cloth pouch tucked into some merchant's pack, its fragrance still intact after weeks on the road. The steam rose from the pot in slow, unhurried curls, catching the light of the coals and then dissolving upward into the cool night air, carrying with it something that felt almost like an invitation. People settled, that is the simplest way to describe what happened next. They settled the way that travelers settle when they have been moving for a long time and have at last found a place that will hold them safely through the dark hours. A group of merchants from the eastern provinces spread a cloth on the ground near one of the braziers and arranged themselves around it with the ease of people who had done this many times before. Their legs folded comfortably, their backs resting against the low stone wall of the courtyard. A few of them had brought their own small additions to the meal. A packet of dried meat, a handful of pistachios in their shells, a little jar of something pickled and sharp-smelling that one of them opened with evident pleasure. They passed these things around without ceremony, as naturally as breathing. Not far from them, a small party that had come from somewhere along the western routes. You could tell by the cut of their robes and the particular way they tied their head coverings. Had found a spot near the second brazier and were doing something similar. Laying out what they had, adding it to what the Caravanserai had provided, making of the whole thing something larger and more comfortable than any one part of it alone. One of them had a small round of hard cheese wrapped in waxed cloth, and he unwrapped it carefully and broke it into pieces with his hands, the way you break something you intend to share, and passed those pieces to whoever was nearby, not only to his own companions, but to the man sitting just beyond them who happened to look up at the right moment. That small gesture, the breaking of the cheese, the passing of it to a stranger, was the kind of thing that happened often in these places, so often that it had ceased to require any particular thought or intention. It was simply what you did when you were here, in this courtyard on this kind of evening. The road had a way of dissolving certain boundaries that might have held firm in other circumstances. Not through any grand philosophy, but through the simple practical fact of shared hunger and shared warmth, and the shared relief of having arrived somewhere safe before the night grew fully dark. Imagine, if you like, the sound of it. Not loud, not festive in any boisterous way, but full of a low, continuous murmur, the sound of many small conversations happening at once in several different languages. None of them quite intelligible from a distance, but all of them carrying the same general tone of ease and mild contentment. Here and there a laugh. Soft and unhurried, the occasional clink of a clay cup set down on stone. The sound of bread being torn, which is one of the most domestic and reassuring sounds in the world. The sound of something simple being prepared to nourish. A young man who worked for one of the larger trading caravans moved between the groups with a clay pitcher, pouring a warm drink into whatever cups were offered to him. It was something made from dried herbs and a little honey. Slightly sweet, slightly bitter, with a faint floral note that drifted up when you held the cup near your face. He poured without hurrying, stopping to exchange a few words here and there, accepting a piece of dried fig that someone pressed into his hand as a kind of thanks. The cups were of different sizes and different shapes, some smooth, some slightly rough where the glaze had not taken evenly. And each one felt a little different in the hand, a little worn in its own particular way from its own particular history of use. The conversation that floated through the courtyard on such evenings was rarely about great matters. It was the conversation of people who had been traveling for days and who were tired in a pleasant, well-earned way and who wanted nothing more demanding than the company of other human voices. Someone described the road they had come along. Not its dangers, just its qualities. The way the dust had been fine and pale for 2 days, and then had given way to a stretch of darker, firmer ground that had been easier on the animals. Someone else mentioned a caravanserai they had stayed at further east, comparing its courtyard to this one, noting that the water there had tasted of minerals in a way that this water did not. A third person offered an opinion about the quality of the bread, which was good, very good, with a slight char on the underside and a softness within that suggested it had been made that same afternoon. These were the textures of the evening. Not dramatic, not particularly memorable in themselves, but accumulating into something that had its own quiet richness. The way a piece of plain cloth can be beautiful simply because of the evenness of its weave and the warmth of its color. The firelight moved across the faces around the braziers, shifting as the coals shifted, casting everything in tones of amber and ochre and deep shadow. The stone walls of the courtyard, which had been sun-warmed all day, were still giving back a little of that warmth even now, so that the air near them was slightly softer than the air in the open center of the space. The camels, settled in their part of the courtyard, had grown very quiet. One of them made an occasional low sound, something between a groan and a sigh, the kind of sound that large animals make when they are comfortable and have no particular complaint. Their breath rose in faint clouds in the cooling air. Their handlers had eaten and were now sitting together in a loose group, speaking quietly, one of them working at something with his hands in the way that people work at small tasks, not because they need to, but because their hands like to be occupied while their minds rest. Somewhere in the caravanserai, perhaps in one of the rooms that opened off the courtyard, perhaps just at the edge of the firelit space, someone was playing a stringed instrument very softly. It was not a performance, not something intended to be listened to so much as something that simply existed alongside everything else. The way a stream exists alongside a path, present and pleasant without demanding attention. The melody it traced was simple and circular, returning to the same few notes with slight variations each time. The kind of music that does not go anywhere in particular and is all the more restful for that. The food was nothing elaborate. This was not a feast, not a celebration, it was simply supper. The ordinary, necessary, deeply satisfying thing that supper is when you have been working and moving and are now still. The stew from the pot was ladled into bowls and carried around, and people ate it with the bread, tearing pieces and using them to scoop, in the manner common to travelers from many different places along the road. It was thick and warm and slightly smoky from the coals, and it tasted of the spices and of something else that is harder to name. Perhaps simply the taste of food eaten outdoors in the evening, which always has a particular quality that indoor meals do not quite replicate. A slight edge of cool air mixing with the warmth of the food. The smell of the night coming in around the edges. A merchant who had been on the road for many weeks sat back from his empty bowl and looked up at the sky, which was by now fully dark and scattered with stars so numerous and so bright that they seemed almost too many. Almost more than the sky could comfortably hold. He did not say anything about them. He simply looked at them for a while in the comfortable silence of someone who has eaten and is warm and has no immediate need to do or say anything at all. Then he looked back down at the fire, and his expression was the expression of a person who is, in this moment, without complaint. The evening had a way of folding itself gently inward as it went on, the conversations growing a little shorter, the pauses between them a little longer. People refilled their cups and did not immediately begin talking again. A few of the younger travelers had already found their way to their sleeping mats, their shapes visible at the edges of the courtyard. Already still, the braziers were beginning to settle, the coals sinking slowly into themselves, still warm, still giving off their steady amber glow, but quieter now, more contained. The man with the pitcher came around one more time, offering the last of the warm herb drink to anyone who wanted it. And a few hands reached out and a few cups were filled. And then he set the pitcher down and settled himself near one of the fires and did not move again. The cheese and the dried fruits and the pistachios had been finished or put away. The pot had been moved to the side, its contents mostly gone, its sides still warm to the touch. The cloth that had been laid out for the meal had been folded and put aside, and the ground where it had been was just the courtyard again. Stone and dust and the faint impressions of where people had been sitting. The music, wherever it was coming from, had grown even softer, so soft now that you could not always be sure you were still hearing it and not simply remembering it. It was the kind of music that accompanies the closing of a day rather than the living of it. A gentle accompaniment to the process of setting things down and letting the hours go. The night air had a smell to it now that was different from the smell of the cooking. Cooler, cleaner, with a faint trace of dust and something dry and faintly sweet that might have been the desert itself. The vast quiet spaces through which this road ran, breathing gently in the dark. It was a smell that belonged to this part of the world and to this particular hour. And the people in the courtyard breathed it in without noticing. The way you breathe in air that is simply the air of wherever you are. Familiar enough now to have stopped being remarkable. The braziers glowed on, patient and steady, tending the last of their warmth into the courtyard. The stars above were very bright and very still. The stone walls held the space together, solid and unhurried as they had held it through many hundreds of such evenings before this one, and would hold it through many hundreds more. And the people within those walls had eaten and were warm and were beginning, without quite deciding to let the evening carry them towards sleep, toward the long, undemanding darkness that waited just ahead. as simple and as certain as the coals settling quietly into gray. And so the darkness settled over the caravanserai like a woolen blanket drawn up slowly, corner by corner, until the whole courtyard lay beneath it. Breathing softly, the fires had burned down to their embers, those small orange constellations scattered across the packed earth. And the air carried the last warmth of the evening, a warmth that smelled of cumin and animal hair, and the faint sweetness of dried apricots that someone had left in a clay bowl near the eastern wall. The camels had folded themselves into stillness. The horses had grown quiet. And in the spaces between sleep and waking, something else had begun. It began, as it so often did, with a single voice. Somewhere near the center of the courtyard, where the stone fountain still murmured its patient, circular song, a merchant from the trading cities of Persia had settled himself on a low wooden bench with a cup of something warm between his palms. He was a man of perhaps 50 years, with a beard that had gone the color of pale sand, and he wore a robe of deep indigo that had faded at the elbows from long travel. He was not speaking loudly. He was speaking in the way that people speak when they are not entirely sure who is listening, when the words are as much for themselves as for anyone else. A low, unhurried murmur that rose and fell with the same rhythm as the fountain beside him. He was telling a story. It was a story about a city he had visited in his youth. A city where the markets opened before dawn and the air at that hour smelled of rose water and fresh bread, and the particular dustiness of carpets being unrolled for the first time in a season. He described the way the light came in those early mornings, how it arrived not all at once but in gradations. First a pale silver above the eastern rooftops, then a soft amber that touched the tops of the minarets, then finally a full warm gold that poured down into the streets and turned everything it touched into something that looked, for just a moment, like it had been made of honey. A young man from somewhere along the northern steppe routes had been sitting nearby, tending the last of a small fire, and he looked up when the Persian merchant began to speak. He did not understand all the words. His Persian was the kind learned from necessity rather than study, assembled piece by piece over months of travel. But he understood enough, and what he did not understand he seemed to feel. The way you can feel the shape of music even when you do not know the song. He nodded slowly. He added a small piece of wood to his fire, almost without thinking, as though he wanted the light to last a little longer. Across the courtyard, a group of traders from the eastern cities. Men who dealt in silk and lacquerwork and the particular kind of fine porcelain that arrived packed in straw and sawdust and still somehow survived the journey, had spread their sleeping mats near the sheltered arcade and were not yet fully asleep. One of them, a small man with quick hands and a habit of gesturing even when he was sitting still, was also speaking. His language was different entirely from the Persian merchants. The sounds rounder and more musical, the sentences rising and falling in a way that felt almost like singing. He was describing something that made the men around him smile. A memory, perhaps, or a joke, or some small observation about the evening that had struck him as worth sharing. The two conversations were happening at the same time, in different corners of the same courtyard, in different languages, and yet they did not compete with each other. They layered the way sounds layer in a forest. The fountain and the low Persian murmur and the musical cadences from the eastern arcade and somewhere further away the soft snoring of a man who had already found his sleep. All of it settling into a single texture of sound that was somehow more restful than silence. This was one of the quiet miracles of the Caravanserai. People who study the great trading routes of the 12th century sometimes note, almost in passing, that these stopping places were among the most linguistically diverse environments that most people of that era would ever encounter in their lives. A merchant who had grown up in a single city, who had spent his childhood hearing only one language in the streets and at the table, would arrive at a caravanserai and find himself surrounded by sounds he had never heard before. The particular musicality of Arabic as spoken by traders from the western ports, the clipped precision of certain Turkic dialects, the flowing vowel sounds of Persian, the tonal shifts of the languages carried along the eastern routes. It could have been disorienting. It could have felt strange and unwelcoming. But it rarely did, it seems. Or at least not for long. There was something about the shared experience of the road, the long days in the same dust, the same sun, the same thirst, that created a kind of understanding that did not require words. And beyond that, there was the practical matter of trade itself, which had over generations produced its own informal language. Not a true language, not something with grammar and literature and the weight of centuries behind it, but a working vocabulary assembled from many tongues. Words for prices and quantities, for the names of goods, for the basic courtesies of commerce and hospitality. A merchant from the Persian cities and a merchant from the eastern silk towns might share only a few dozen words in common. But those words, spoken with the right gesture and the right expression, were often enough. Imagine, if you will, the texture of that exchange. Two men sitting close to the same fire, one holding up a small piece of cloth to the light, the other nodding and rubbing the fabric between his fingers, and between them a conversation conducted partly in words, partly in gestures, partly in the universal language of a raised eyebrow or a slow appreciative nod. The cloth is soft, the weave is fine. These things do not need translation. But the stories were different. Stories require more. They require the particular music of a specific language, the idioms that have no equivalent elsewhere, the rhythms that carry meaning beyond the words themselves. And yet, in the Caravanserai, stories were told anyway, across every barrier of language and culture, because the impulse to tell them was simply too strong to be stopped by something as practical as mutual incomprehension. The Persian merchant by the fountain had attracted a small audience now. The young man from the northern routes was still there, still listening with that same patient attention. A woman who traveled with a group of traders from the western regions. She was a merchant in her own right, dealing in spices and medicinal herbs. A practical and capable person who had been making this journey for many years, had settled herself nearby with her sewing. She did not speak Persian either, but she had set down her needle and was watching the merchant's face with the kind of attention that suggested she was following something, even if not the words. He was describing a garden now. You could tell it was a garden from the way his hands moved. Slow, expansive gestures that suggested space and greenery, and the particular kind of peace that comes from sitting in the shade of something that has been growing for a very long time. He described, it seemed, the sound of water in that garden, and the smell of orange blossom in the early evening, and the way the light came through the leaves and made patterns on the ground that shifted and changed as the air moved. His voice had grown quieter as he spoke, softer, as though the memory itself were asking him to be gentle with it. The woman with the sewing had picked up her needle again, but her movements were slower now, more automatic, as though her hands were working on their own while the rest of her was somewhere else. In a garden, perhaps, or in some equivalent place that she carried in her own memory. Some corner of her own life where the light was soft and the air smelled of something flowering. This is one of the things that stories do, even across the distance of language. They do not always carry their specific content across that distance. The particular city, the particular garden, the particular quality of that remembered light. But they carry their shape. The shape of a memory told with love. The shape of a place that mattered. These shapes are recognizable, it seems, in almost any language, to almost anyone who has ever had a place they loved and left behind. Further along the arcade, a different kind of storytelling was taking place. An older trader, a man who had been making the Silk Road journey for so many years that he carried the road in his posture. In the particular way he held his shoulders, as though always ready for the next day's walking, was sitting with two younger men who appeared to be making the journey for the first time. They had the look of people who are still slightly astonished by everything they see, who have not yet learned to take the strangeness of travel for granted. The older man was talking to them in a low, steady voice, and from the way the younger men lined in, from the way they occasionally laughed quietly or shook their heads in a slow, wondering way, it was clear that he was telling them something about the road itself. Perhaps he was describing a place they had not yet reached, some valley or mountain pass or city that waited ahead of them, some landmark that those who had traveled the route before always mentioned to those who had not. Perhaps he was telling them about a time when the journey had been harder, or stranger, or more surprising than they expected. Perhaps he was simply telling them that it was all right, that the road was long but the road was known, that others had walked it before them and would walk it after, and that the caravanserai at the end of each day's travel was always there, always with its gate open, always with its fountain and its fire and its smell of wood smoke and animals and shared food. Whatever he was telling them, the younger men's faces had relaxed. The slight tension that travel puts into the shoulders of the inexperienced, that low-level alertness, that constant small readiness, had softened. They were leaning back now. Not forward, their breathing was slower. The older man's voice continued, steady and unhurried, like water moving over smooth stones. In the caravanserai, this kind of passing down was constant. The road had its own oral tradition, its own body of practical knowledge and accumulated wisdom that existed not in any book, but in the conversations of experienced travelers with newer ones. Which wells were reliable and which were not? Which mountain routes were passable in which seasons? Which cities had the best markets for which goods? Which caravanserais along the route were known for their hospitality, for the quality of their water, for the particular bread that the caretaker's family baked each morning in a clay oven behind the main building. This knowledge traveled with the travelers, passed from voice to voice, from generation to generation of merchants and guides and camel drivers. And it was as valuable in its way as any of the goods packed into the camel loads. But it was not only practical knowledge that traveled this way. It was also songs and jokes, and the names of things in many languages, and the particular way a person from one part of the world greeted a stranger, and the foods that were eaten at certain times of year in certain places, and the stories of remarkable people or remarkable journeys or remarkable coincidences that had become, over time, part of the shared folklore of the road. A story that began in the markets of one city might travel, carried in the memory of a single merchant, all the way to the cities of another continent, arriving changed by the journey. Some details added, some forgotten, some transformed by the imagination of each teller into something slightly new, but recognizable still carrying its original shape, its original feeling. The caravanserai at night was where much of this traveling happened. Not in the daylight hours of walking and loading and the practical management of animals and goods, but here in these quiet hours between the evening meal and sleep, when the fires were low and the darkness was complete and there was nothing to do but rest, and if rest did not come immediately, to talk. The voices in the courtyard were growing fewer now, and softer. The Persian merchant by the fountain had finished his story about the garden, or perhaps he had simply let it trail away into the night, as stories sometimes do, not ending so much as dissolving, the way the edge of a dream dissolves when you try to hold it. He was sitting quietly now, his cup still warm between his palms, his eyes half closed, looking at the last glow of the embers with the expression of a man who has said what he wanted to say and is content. The young man from the northern routes had lain down on his mat. The woman with the sewing had folded her work away. The older trader and his two younger companions had grown quiet. The conversation between them finished or paused or simply no longer necessary. The fountain continued its small, circular song. The camels breathed their long, slow breaths somewhere in the darkness above the caravanserai walls. The stars were doing what stars do, burning steadily, indifferently, beautifully in the deep black of the 12th century sky, untroubled by the small warm world below them. All those languages, all those voices, all those stories carried so far from their origins. They were settling now like the dust settles after a long day's travel, drifting gently down through the quiet air and coming to rest at last in the soft, undisturbed silence of a courtyard full of sleeping people. People from 3 continents and a dozen languages and 100 different lives, all of them breathing for this one still night, in the same unhurried rhythm, beneath the same patient stars. And so the caravanserai settles into itself, the way a sleeping body settles into warm blankets, finding its own comfortable weight, its own natural stillness. The last of the evening's conversations has softened into murmur, and the murmur has softened into silence, and the silence itself has taken on a kind of texture, not empty, never empty in a place like this, but full and rounded the way a bowl is full even when it holds nothing but air. Somewhere near the eastern wall, the gatekeeper has made his final rounds. He is a man of perhaps 50 years, with broad shoulders that have grown slightly rounded at the top from decades of lifting heavy timber bars into iron brackets, and he walks his familiar path without needing to think about it, his sandaled feet finding the worn stone by memory alone. The torches along the inner arcade have been reduced to their nighttime count. not extinguished, never fully extinguished, but turned down low so that the courtyard holds a warm amber glow rather than the lively brightness of the evening hours. The shadows have grown longer and softer. The courtyard, which only a few hours ago was alive with the shuffling of camels and the calling of merchants and the bright clatter of copper pots being set out for the evening meal, is now a place of deep and gentle quiet. The gates themselves are worth a moment of quiet thought. They are enormous things, those gates. Great panels of timber reinforced with iron strapping, each one as tall as 3 men standing on each other's shoulders, hung on pivots of polished bronze that have been oiled so carefully and so regularly that they swing with almost no sound at all. The wood is old, not rotten, never rotten in a well-kept caravanserai, but seasoned and dark and dense with age. The grain of it raised slightly by years of wind and dust and the occasional desert rain, so that if you were to run your palm across the surface, you would feel the whole long story of the timber in the texture of it. Imagine pressing your hand flat against wood like that, cool and slightly rough, smelling of iron and old resin and the faintest trace of the cedar oil used to preserve it. There is something deeply reassuring about a door that old, that solid, that carefully tended. The gatekeeper lifts the great bar, a single beam of dense hardwood, almost as long as a man is tall, and lowers it into its brackets with the practiced ease of someone who has done this same thing perhaps 10,000 times. It settles with a low, resonant thud that travels through the stone beneath his feet and up through the walls and into the very fabric of the building. A sound that every experienced traveler in every sleeping chamber and every corner of the stable yard recognizes without waking. A sound that means the same thing in every language spoken here tonight. You are safe now, you may rest. The world outside will wait until morning. The world outside, it is worth pausing on that for just a moment. Because the world outside a caravanserai at night in this era is not a hostile thing. Not precisely, but it is certainly an uncertain one. The road stretches away in both directions into the darkness, pale and dusty and empty, winding through terrain that is beautiful in the daylight. The low hills covered in sparse, dry grass, the occasional stand of poplar trees marking a watercourse, the distant mountains holding their snow like a quiet secret, but which at night becomes simply dark, simply vast, simply without shelter. The caravanserai sits in that landscape like a lamp set on a windowsill, a warm square of light and enclosure in all that open darkness. And now the gates are barred, and the lamp is turned down low, and everything inside the walls belongs, for these few hours, to a different world than the road. The camels know this in whatever way camels know things. They are settled now in the stable yard, folded into their characteristic resting posture with their long legs tucked beneath them and their great necks curved slightly forward. And they breathe with a slow, oceanic rhythm that is one of the most peaceful sounds in the world if you have ever been fortunate enough to hear it. A deep, unhurried exhale, a pause. A long, slow inhale, a pause again. As regular and patient as the tide. Their saddle blankets have been removed and folded. Their loads long since carried inside and stacked in the storage rooms that line the lower level of the caravanserai. And they rest now in the clean straw with the contentment of creatures who have walked a very long way and arrived somewhere they recognize as safe. Camels have been coming to places like this for generations. Some of them the older animals, have made this particular journey many times, and there is a reasonable chance that they remember the smell of this courtyard, the particular quality of the water from this well, the texture of the straw in this stable yard. Animals remember comfort, they return to it with gratitude. The merchants themselves are distributed through the sleeping chambers in a way that reflects the quiet social geography of the caravanserai. The wealthier travelers, those with larger caravans, those who have been on the road long enough to know the value of a private room, have taken the chambers on the upper level, which are slightly larger and slightly better ventilated and look out over the courtyard rather than into the stable yard. They sleep on low wooden platforms covered with their own bedrolls, their own cushions, the familiar smell of their own blankets, a small piece of home carried across thousands of miles of road. A merchant from the eastern provinces might have a blanket of heavy silk, deep red worn soft with use. A trader from the western cities might have a woolen cloak spread over him, smelling of the particular wool of sheep from his home region. A smell he probably cannot even identify consciously anymore, but which works on him the way all familiar smells work on sleeping people, settling something deep and animal in the body, saying you belong somewhere, you are known somewhere. You will return. The less wealthy travelers, the younger merchants just beginning their careers, the assistants and factors who travel with the larger caravans, the occasional pilgrim or scholar making a long journey with very little money and very great curiosity, are settled in the lower chambers or in the long communal sleeping areas that run along two sides of the courtyard. These rooms are simpler, their floors covered with woven mats that have been there long enough to have taken on the compressed, slightly shiny quality of things that have been slept on by many thousands of bodies over many years. The smell in these rooms is warm and human and not unpleasant. Wool and wood smoke and the particular dry dustiness of road travel. And beneath it all the faint sweetness of the cedar beams overhead, which were put in when the caravanserai was built and which will still be there, still faintly fragrant, long after everyone sleeping beneath them tonight has completed their journey and gone home. In one of these communal rooms, a young man from somewhere far to the east is lying on his back with his hands folded on his chest, his eyes not quite closed, watching the faint flicker of torchlight from the courtyard move across the ceiling. He is perhaps 19 years old, and this is his first long journey, and he has not yet learned the traveler's gift of sleeping anywhere. Sleeping immediately, sleeping through anything. He is still in that stage of travel where everything is slightly overwhelming. The distances, the strangeness, the sheer number of people one encounters who live entirely differently and think entirely differently and yet are. When you sit across a fire from them and share a meal, entirely recognizable as people, as fellow travelers through the same world. He is thinking about this, probably in a gentle, unfocused way. The way young people think when they are tired but not yet asleep. The thoughts moving slowly and without urgency, like clouds on a windless day. And gradually, the warmth of the room and the weight of the day's walking and the deep oceanic breathing of the camels just outside the wall will do their work. And his eyes will close, and the thoughts will slow further, and he will sleep. The night watchman makes his rounds on the upper walkway that runs along the inside of the outer wall. This is a covered gallery, just wide enough for one person to walk comfortably, and from it the watchman can see the whole interior of the caravanserai laid out below him. The courtyard with its central well, The arcaded galleries on each level, the stable yard to one side, the kitchen with its banked fire glowing dull orange through the low doorway. He carries a small oil lamp in one hand, though he barely needs it. He knows every step of this walkway, every place where the stone is slightly uneven, every bracket and beam. The lamp is more for the comfort of anyone who might glance up and see it moving steadily around the perimeter. A small moving light that says, in the same wordless language as the barred gate, someone is watching, someone is attending. You may rest. He pauses at the corner where the walkway turns and looks out through one of the narrow openings in the outer wall. Not quite a window, more a gap in the stonework designed to let air move through while keeping the wall strong. The road is visible from here, pale in the starlight, empty and still. Far away, so far that it might be imagination. There is the faint smell of a cooking fire from some encampment beyond sight, and the very distant sound, or perhaps just the memory of a sound, of a dog barking once and then falling silent. The night is large and the caravanserai is small within it, but it is solid and it is warm, and its gates are barred, and that is enough. The kitchen has been cleaned and set in order for the morning. The great copper pots that fed perhaps 200 people this evening have been scrubbed and turned upside down on their wooden rack, and they gleam dully in the last light of the banked fire, their surfaces covered with the fine small dents and scratches of long use, each one a record of a ladle struck against the rim or a pot set down too firmly on a stone floor. The fire itself has been reduced to a bed of coals that will hold through the night and make the morning's work of relighting unnecessary. A small practical kindness to whoever will rise earliest to begin the bread. The smell in the kitchen is deep and layered. Wood smoke and cumin and the faint sweetness of dried fruit that was simmered earlier in the evening. And beneath all of it, the clean mineral smell of water from the well, and the particular smell of hot iron and ash that belongs to any kitchen that has been in use for a long time. The cook's assistant, a boy of perhaps 12 who has been on his feet since before dawn, is already deeply asleep in the small room off the kitchen, curled on his side with his knees drawn up, one hand tucked under his cheek. He will not remember falling asleep. One moment he was sitting on the edge of his sleeping mat, pulling off his sandals. And the next moment it will be morning, and the fire will need to be built up, and the water will need to be fetched from the well. And the whole long warm machinery of the caravanserai will begin again. But that is morning, that is many hours away. For now, the building breathes. This is not a fanciful thing to say. Any large structure holding many sleeping people does something that resembles breathing. The slow exchange of warm air and cool air through its openings. The slight shift and settle of stone and timber as the temperature drops through the night. The accumulated warmth of hundreds of sleeping bodies radiating outward through the walls. The caravanserai has been doing this for decades. Perhaps longer. It was built to do this. Every room, every gallery, every carefully placed opening in the outer wall was designed by someone who understood both the fierce heat of the day and the surprising cold of the desert night, and who wanted the building to hold its warmth and share it generously with whoever came to shelter here. And so the night deepens, as nights do, settling into its own quietest hours. That long stretch between midnight and the first pale suggestion of dawn, when the world seems to pause, when even the wind drops, when the stars are at their clearest and most numerous, and the darkness between them seems almost soft. The camels breathe, the watchman walks his slow circuit. The torches burn low and steady. In room after room, people sleep the deep and dreamless sleep of those who have walked a long way and arrived somewhere safe, their bodies releasing the day's accumulated effort, their minds gone quiet and still as a pool of water in a sheltered place. The great timber bar rests in its brackets. The gates hold the walls, which have stood through many seasons and will stand through many more. Hold everything inside them gently. The way cupped hands hold water, not tightly, not with any effort, but simply by being what they are, simply by being there, and the night continues its slow and patient work of turning toward morning, unhurried as it has always been, as it will always be, moving at its own deep and unalterable pace through the dark hours toward the first faint warmth of the coming dawn. And so the night deepens, as nights on the high plateau have always deepened. Slowly and without announcement, the darkness settling over the caravanserai the way a heavy woolen blanket settles over a sleeping child. Not all at once, but in gentle increments, fold by fold, until the last pale memory of the western horizon has finally let go, and the sky above the open courtyard becomes something else entirely. Something vast and intimate at the same time. A ceiling of such extraordinary depth and luminosity that the merchants and travelers who have made this place their home for one quiet night find themselves, almost without meaning to, tilting their faces upward. The courtyard is the heart of this place, and like all hearts, it is most itself when the busy work of the day has finished. During the long afternoon hours, it was full of noise and negotiation. The scrape of wooden crates across stone, the liquid syllables of Arabic mixing with the rounder tones of Persian, the occasional bright phrase of a Sogdian trader who has learned to make himself understood in half a dozen languages and considers this skill as essential as his scales. There was the smell of animal sweat and fresh hay, the sharp mineral scent of well water drawn up in a leather bucket, the drifting sweetness of cardamom from a merchant who had opened one of his smaller parcels to check the contents. All of that has quieted now. The crates are stacked, the scales are wrapped in cloth. The animals are settled, and the courtyard has become something softer, something that belongs more to the stars than to commerce. The caravanserai itself is built in the shape of a square, as most of them are along this stretch of road, the thick mud brick walls rising perhaps 4 times the height of a tall man, their surfaces still holding the warmth they gathered from the afternoon sun. If you were to press your palm against those walls now, in the deep middle of the night, you would feel it a faint, stored warmth like touching the side of a clay oven hours after the fire has gone out. The walls are the color of pale ochre in daylight, but at night they take on a softer tone, a kind of warm gray, and the texture of them is rough and honest. The marks of the builder's hands still visible in places where the mud was pressed and smoothed long decades ago. The caravanserai has been here for perhaps 60 years. Built during a period when the road was busy and the local governor understood that a safe resting place was worth more than almost anything else he could offer to the merchants who passed through and left a little of their wealth behind. There are perhaps 40 people sleeping or resting in the rooms that line the inner walls tonight. Tucked into the small arched chambers that open onto the courtyard like the cells of a honeycomb. Each room is just large enough for a man and his most precious cargo, the things he keeps closest to him, the sealed leather pouches, the small locked wooden boxes. the bolts of silk wrapped in oiled cloth to keep out the dust. The rooms have no windows facing outward, only the arched opening that looks into the courtyard. And this means that when a traveler lies down on his reed mat in his folded robe and closes his eyes, the last thing he sees before sleep takes him is a rectangle of open sky, framed by the arch above him, filled with stars. Imagine that for a moment. The particular comfort of lying in a small enclosed space while looking out at something infinite. The walls close enough to feel safe. The sky open enough to feel free. It is a feeling that travelers on this road have described in their journals and letters home for centuries. This sensation of being held and released at the same time. And it may be one of the reasons that sleep comes so readily in a caravanserai courtyard, even for those who are far from home and carrying the weight of a long journey in their shoulders and their feet. The camels are settled along the eastern wall, in the long open stable area that the builders always included in their designs. Because a caravan without its animals is simply a collection of people stranded in the middle of a very large and indifferent landscape. The camels have been unloaded and watered and fed, and now they rest in their particular way, folded down onto their haunches with their long necks curved, their breathing slow and audible in the quiet. A soft, rhythmic sound, almost like the sound of distant surf if you have ever been near enough to the sea to remember it. Their smell is strong and familiar to everyone here. A warm animal smell that is part of the texture of life on the road. As unremarkable to a seasoned trader as the smell of wood smoke is to someone who has spent a winter by a fire. One of the camels shifts slightly in its sleep, and the small bells on its harness, left on because removing them takes time and the cameleer is tired, give a single soft chime, one quiet note that rises into the courtyard and dissolves into the dark air above. Near the center of the courtyard there is a low stone basin, a fountain that runs during the day from a channel fed by a source somewhere in the hills to the north. At night the flow is reduced to a trickle, just enough to keep the water fresh, and the sound of it is one of the quietest sounds imaginable. A thin, continuous thread of water falling against stone, so gentle that you can only hear it clearly when everything else has gone still. Several of the travelers have placed their sleeping mats near the basin, not close enough to be damp, but close enough to hear the water. Because the sound of running water is one of those things that the human mind finds deeply, almost inexplicably soothing, and people who know this about themselves will always seek it out when they can. A small fire still burns near the western wall, tended by the caravanserai's night watchman, a quiet man of middle years who has held this position for a long time and who moves through the sleeping courtyard with the practiced lightness of someone who has learned not to disturb things unnecessarily. He feeds the fire with slow deliberation, adding one piece of wood at a time, keeping the flame low and steady, enough to provide light and warmth without crackling loudly enough to wake anyone. The fire gives off a smell of juniper wood tonight, clean and slightly resinous, and the thin column of smoke it sends upward drifts across the courtyard in a slow diagonal, drawn by some barely perceptible movement of air from the north. And the smoke catches the starlight in a way that makes it visible. A pale, translucent ribbon rising and dispersing, unhurried and entirely at peace with itself. Around the fire, not quite asleep but not quite awake either, are three men who met for the first time this afternoon and have spent the evening in the easy, uncomplicated conversation of travelers who know they will part tomorrow and never see each other again, which gives the conversation a particular quality of openness. One is a merchant from the Levantine coast who trades in dyed cloth and small quantities of very fine glasswork, the kind that catches light in a way that makes people stop and look twice. One is a physician traveling east to study with a teacher whose reputation has reached him across a considerable distance. And one is a young man from somewhere in the Chinese borderlands who is making his first long journey westward with a consignment of lacquer work on behalf of his uncle, and who has been watching and listening all evening with the careful attention of someone who understands that he is learning something that cannot be taught any other way. They are not talking now. They are simply present together beside the fire, each lost in his own comfortable silence, the way people sometimes are when they have talked enough and found that the silence between them is also pleasant. The stars above the courtyard are extraordinary. This is one of the things about the high plateau that travelers mention again and again in their accounts. The stars at this elevation, in this dry air, far from any city large enough to dim the sky with its lamps and fires. The stars are not the modest scattered points of light that someone living in a crowded city might see on a clear night. They are dense and layered, arranged in depths so that looking upward feels less like looking at a flat ceiling and more like looking into something. A great dark volume filled with light at every distance. The broad pale river of the galaxy stretches from one end of the courtyard to the other, and it is bright enough tonight to cast the faintest of shadows. Not shadows you could measure or point to, but shadows you can sense. A slight deepening of darkness on the far side of a sleeping figure. A barely perceptible difference in tone between the lit stone of the courtyard and the stone that the galaxy's light does not quite reach. A merchant from the Persian city of Nishapur is lying on his back on his sleeping mat, which he has dragged to the open center of the courtyard because he finds the walls of his small room too close tonight. Or perhaps because he simply wanted to look at the sky before he slept. He is a man who has made this journey many times, who knows every caravanserai between his home city and Samarkand by the particular smell of their water and the sound their gates make when they close at nightfall. And yet he has not lost the ability to be quietly moved by the stars. He lies with his hands folded on his chest and his eyes open, and he looks upward with an expression that is not wonder exactly. Or not only wonder, but something more settled than that. A kind of recognition, perhaps. The feeling of seeing something familiar that is also always new. Somewhere in one of the arched rooms along the northern wall, a child is sleeping. She belongs to a family traveling together, which is less common on this road than it once was, but not unheard of. A merchant who has decided to relocate his household rather than simply conduct his trade, bringing his wife and daughter and a great deal of carefully packed domestic life along with his commercial goods. The child has been asleep for hours, since well before the last light left the sky, worn out by the long day's riding and the excitement of arrival. She is sleeping deeply and without movement, the way children sleep when they are genuinely tired, and the sound of her breathing, just barely audible to her mother who lies beside her, is one of the most peaceful sounds in the courtyard tonight, though almost no one else can hear it. The night watchman makes his slow circuit of the courtyard walls, not hurrying, pausing occasionally to listen to the darkness beyond the gate. The gate is heavy and bolted, and the road outside is quiet. No sound of hooves or wheels. No voices, only the faint sound of wind moving across the plateau and lawn. Unhurried waves, the caravanserai's walls are thick enough that the wind does not enter so much as it passes around. And the courtyard is sheltered and still while just outside. The grasses of the plateau bend and straighten in a slow, continuous rhythm that has nothing to do with the affairs of merchants or the schedules of caravans. The watchman listens for a moment, then continues his circuit, his soft leather shoes making almost no sound on the stone. The fire has burned lower now. The juniper wood reduced to a bed of coals that glow with a deep, unhurried orange, the color of embers in the last hour before they cool completely. The three men beside the fire have all shifted into sleep without quite deciding to. The physician lining against a rolled blanket. The cloth merchant with his head resting on his arm. The young man from the borderlands curled on his side with his face toward the warmth. They look in the firelight, like figures from a painting. Three travelers resting at the end of a long road. Their differences of language and origin and destination invisible now, smoothed away by the great equalizer of sleep. The stars continue their slow turning, as they have turned above every caravanserai on this road, above every sleeping caravan, above every merchant who ever lay down on a reed mat in a mud brick room and looked up through an arched doorway at the sky and thought, for just a moment, of home. The water in the fountain basin catches a little of the starlight on its surface, and the reflection trembles slightly with the movement of the water. A small bright trembling, quiet and continuous, like a heartbeat, like breathing. The night is at its deepest now, that long still hour that comes sometime after midnight and before the first suggestion of dawn, when the darkness seems most complete and the silence most absolute and the sleeping world most thoroughly at rest. In the caravanserai's small kitchen, a pot of water sits over banked coals, ready for the morning tea that will be prepared before first light. The smell of the coals drifts through the kitchen doorway and mingles with the juniper smoke and the cool, dry air of the plateau. And the whole courtyard holds this gentle mixture of smells the way a cupped hand holds water, carefully, temporarily, with a kind of quiet grace. And in all the small rooms along the walls, and on the mats in the open courtyard, and in the stable where the camels breathe their slow and steady breath, the travelers of the Silk Road sleep. They carry between them, in their sealed pouches and their locked boxes and their carefully wrapped bundles, the goods of 3 continents, the silk and lacquer of the East, the glass and dyed cloth of the West, the spices and medicines of the lands between. But for now all of that is resting too, and what remains is simply this: a courtyard full of sleeping people under an enormous sky, held safe within 4 thick walls, drifting through the dark hours in the gentle company of strangers who are, for this one night, something almost like neighbors. And so the night holds them a little longer, the way a cupped hand holds warm water. Not forever, only for the time that is needed. Somewhere in the deep stillness before first light, the courtyard breathes, the oil lamps have burned low, their flames reduced to small amber threads that tremble faintly against the clay walls, casting the softest possible glow across the sleeping forms of men and animals alike. The camels are folded into themselves along the eastern arcade, their great knees tucked beneath them, their long necks resting in slow, rhythmic arcs if you were to stand very quietly in the middle of that courtyard right now. In the hour before anything stirs, you might notice how the air carries the last warmth of the night fires, how it smells of hay and lanolin and the faint sweetness of dried apricots that someone has left unwrapped near a saddlebag. The whole caravanserai feels suspended, held between the world of sleep and the world of movement, as though it is taking one last slow breath before the day begins. It is the muezzin, somewhere in the distance across the plain, whose voice first opens the darkness. The sound travels across flat land with remarkable gentleness, as sounds tend to do in the hour before dawn, when the air is cool and still and carries things farther than they might otherwise go. It reaches the caravanserai the way a ripple reaches the edge of a pond, softly without urgency, more like a reminder than a command. And slowly, gradually, the human world inside those thick walls begins to rearrange itself from horizontal to vertical. The merchants of the Persian caravan are among the first to rise, as they have been for many mornings in a row, their bodies now accustomed to this particular rhythm of the road. They move quietly without fuss, rolling their sleeping mats with the practiced ease of men who have done this in dozens of courtyards across dozens of mornings. Their breath makes small pale clouds in the cool air. One of them, an older man with a gray beard and a dark woolen cloak wrapped around his shoulders, walks to the stone basin near the caravanserai's well and splashes water across his face, holding his palms there for a moment against his closed eyes, as though greeting the day from behind his own hands. The Chinese merchants, who have traveled the longest road of anyone here, stir a little later, and there is something in the way they move that speaks of deep tiredness. Not the tiredness of a single night, but the accumulated tiredness of many months and many miles. One of them, a younger man who has been sleeping near the warmth of the kitchen wall, opens his eyes slowly and lies still for a moment, looking up at the rectangle of sky above the open courtyard, which is just beginning to shift from black to the deepest possible blue. He watches it the way one watches something beautiful without needing to name it. In the kitchen, the caravanserai's cook has been awake for some time already. This is simply the nature of his work, and he has made his peace with it long ago. He moves in the low firelight with the unhurried confidence of someone who knows exactly where everything is. His hands finding the copper pot, the bag of millet, the earthenware jar of oil without needing to look. The fire he builds is small and practical, feeding it with dry dung and a few sticks of wood, and the smoke that rises from it carries the clean, familiar smell of morning across the courtyard, which is perhaps the most reliable signal of all that the day is truly beginning. Men who have slept through the muezzin's call will often stir at the smell of a morning fire, their bodies responding to something older than language. The camels are the last to be encouraged upright, and this is always a negotiation. A camel that has settled itself comfortably for the night does not rise in a hurry, and it does not rise silently. The handlers approach them with the patient, affectionate firmness of men who have worked alongside these animals for years, who know each animal's particular temperament the way one knows the habits of a long-time companion. There is a particular sound a camel makes when it is being asked to stand, a deep, resonant complaint that is not quite a groan and not quite a bellow, but something in between, something that suggests the animal finds the whole arrangement of the world mildly unreasonable. It is a sound that has been waking people in caravanserais for centuries. And by now, everyone simply accepts it as part of the morning. The way one accepts birdsong or the creak of a door. One by one, the great animals rise. First the hindquarters lifting, then the forelegs unfolding. The whole process accompanied by that characteristic swaying that makes the handlers step back and then step forward again with practiced ease. Once standing, the camels seem to reconsider their complaints. They stand quietly, their long lashes lowered, accepting the attentions of their handlers with a kind of dignified resignation. Someone brings water in a wide wooden trough, and the sound of the animals drinking in the early morning quiet is a slow, deep, satisfying sound, the sound of large creatures taking what they need from the world without drama. The loading of the packs is a process that has its own internal logic and its own unhurried pace. The merchants know their goods the way a reader knows a beloved book. Intimately, precisely, aware of every weight and balance. The bolts of silk that the Chinese merchants carry are wrapped first in oiled cloth and then in felt. Each bundle tied with cord in a specific pattern that the merchant's hands know without thinking. Lifting them into place on the camel's back requires a particular kind of attention, a sense of how the weight should sit and settle, how the animal shifts slightly beneath the load and then steadies. The saddle frames, made of wood and padded with wool, distribute the weight across the camel's back in a way that has been refined over generations of travel. And there is something quietly admirable about this knowledge, the way it has been passed from hand to hand across time. The Syrian merchants are loading their glassware with exceptional care. Each piece of the small bottles, the cups, the decorative vessels that will eventually find their way to tables in distant cities, is wrapped in raw cotton and nestled into baskets lined with more cotton still. The man doing the wrapping works with a delicate, methodical touch, turning each piece slowly in his hands before placing it, checking without hurry that everything is secure. He has carried these things from workshops near the coast where the glass was blown, where the craftsmen shaped molten light into vessels thin enough to let color through. And he is not about to lose them to a careless morning. There is a kind of tenderness in the way he handles them, the tenderness of someone who understands the long chain of labor that brought each object into being. By now, the sky above the open courtyard has moved through its blues and arrived at something softer. A pale gray gold that is not yet sunrise, but is the promise of it. The stars have faded one by one. Not dramatically, but simply, the way things fade when something brighter gradually takes their place. A few birds have begun their conversation somewhere beyond the caravanserai walls, and their voices carry easily in the cool air, small and clear and unhurried. The cook brings out the morning meal in simple clay bowls, a thick porridge made from millet and water, with a little salt and flatbread baked directly on the stone beside the fire, its surface slightly charred in places and warm all the way through. There is tea made from dried herbs that the cook keeps in a small wooden box, and it steams gently in the cool air. The merchants eat standing or crouching near the kitchen doorway, eating with the practical focus of people who know they have a long day ahead and understand that this meal is the foundation of it. There is not much conversation at this hour, or rather the conversation is quiet, practical, the kind that concerns itself with small immediate things. How the bread is warm, how the tea is good, how the air feels as though the day will be clear. The Indian merchant, who has been quieter than most throughout this stay, sits on a low stone bench near the well and eats his porridge slowly, looking at the walls of the caravanserai as though memorizing them. He has stayed in many such places on his long journey, and each one has its own particular quality, its own texture of stone and light and smell. And he has learned to notice these things, to hold them for a moment before moving on. There is something in his expression that is not sadness exactly, but is the feeling adjacent to sadness. The feeling of leaving a place that has been, for a short time, a kind of home. The caravanserai keeper moves through the courtyard in these last minutes before departure, checking things quietly, accepting the small payments that each caravan owes for the night's shelter and water and grain. The transactions are brief and without ceremony, conducted in a mixture of languages and gestures that has served travelers on this road for as long as anyone can remember. A coin pressed into a palm, a nod, a word or two. The caravanserai keeper does not linger over these moments. He has seen 1,000 departures and will see 1,000 more. And each one is the same in its essential nature. People arriving with their burdens, resting and then going on. This is simply what this place is for, and he takes a quiet satisfaction in having provided it well. The gates of the caravanserai, which are wide and built from heavy timber reinforced with iron, swing open with a sound that is deep and slow and final in the way that only large wooden things can be. The morning air comes in from outside, colder and sharper than the air within the walls, carrying with it the smell of dust and open land and the faint green smell of whatever moisture the night has left on the sparse grasses of the plain. The camels, already loaded and led to the gate, accept this new air with their usual equanimity, their nostrils widening slightly, their dark eyes already looking toward the horizon. The Persian caravan moves out first, its bells beginning their soft and rhythmic conversation as the animals find their walking pace. The sound of those bells, which has been so familiar through the night and morning, begins to diminish now, moving away across the plain, growing quieter by degrees until it is something you have to listen carefully to hear, and then something you are not quite sure you are hearing. And then gone, the dust they raise hangs in the still morning air for a while, a pale column that catches the first real light of sunrise and glows faintly gold before it settles. The Chinese merchants follow, and then the Syrian glassware merchant with his carefully loaded baskets, and then the others, each caravan finding its own direction, its own road leading away from this place toward wherever it is going. The Indian merchant is among the last to leave, and he pauses for a moment just outside the gate, looking back at the caravanserai, at its thick walls, its solid towers, its open gateway with that same quiet, attentive expression he has worn all morning. Then he turns and his camels move forward, and the sound of their footsteps on the dry earth fades into the general morning quiet. The caravanserai keeper stands in his gateway and watches them go. He will stand here for a few more minutes, perhaps watching the dust of several departures drift and settle across the plain, watching the light continue to strengthen and warm, watching the road in both directions in case there is another caravan approaching. There is almost always another caravan approaching. This road has been in use for so long, has carried so many people and so many goods and so many ideas from one end of the known world to the other, that it seems to have a kind of permanent life of its own. a slow and continuous movement that does not stop for seasons or years or centuries. Inside the courtyard, his workers are already beginning the work of the morning, sweeping the areas where the camels lay, refilling the water troughs, gathering the scattered straw, preparing the space for whoever arrives next. The fire in the kitchen is still burning, and the smell of it drifts through the quiet courtyard, and the birds that were singing beyond the walls have moved closer now. A few of them perched on the top of the inner wall, looking down with bright eyes at the activity below. The walls of the caravanserai, warmed now by the early sun, give back the heat they absorbed yesterday in a gentle, steady way. If you were to press your palm against the stone on the south-facing wall at this hour, you would feel that warmth. Not the sharp warmth of afternoon sun, but something softer. Something stored and released slowly. The way a good stone holds what it has been given. The walls have held many such mornings, many such departures, many such quiet returns to stillness after the life of a caravan has passed through. And the road stretches out in both directions. Patient and unhurried, the same road it has always been, carrying its travelers forward through dust and light and the long, gentle distances between one place of rest and the next. Somewhere ahead, in a day or a week or a month, there is another caravanserai very much like this one, with its own thick walls and its own courtyard and its own fire and its own keeper waiting at the gate. And the merchants will arrive there tired, and they will be given water, and they will sleep within four walls, and in the morning they will load their goods again and go on. This is how it has always been on this road, and how it will be for a long time yet. This quiet rhythm of movement and rest. Movement and rest, the world's goods traveling slowly from hand to hand across the distances, and people finding in the places built for this purpose something that is not quite home but is the next best thing, which is shelter and warmth, and the unhurried company of others making their own long way through the world. And now the morning is fully here, and the road is open, and everything is calm,